Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Sports Moles Football Shorts. I'm Barney Corkhill. I'm here with our football editor Matt Law, and we're here to talk about game week 19. And at least I think it is game week 19. It's all merging into one in these postponed times we're living in at the moment. But by game week 19, we should be halfway through the season. Obviously, a lot of teams aren't quite halfway through the season in terms of games played. But this is game week 19, and it kicks off with Wolves versus West Brom, a Midlands derby. How do you see that one go, Matt?
Yeah, it's a big game, isn't it, for Wolves? I think, obviously, for West Brom as well. But I just think Wolves this season, we've probably both been quite critical, haven't we, earlier? I certainly was earlier this season as well when they were playing quite well. I just wasn't sure about them. They're down in 14th at the moment. Obviously, lost last time out, didn't they, against home to Everton, which is, I mean, Everton are going well this season, but won in the FA Cup, Wolves. But their league form's just not been good, has it? I mean, they recalled a couple of players, didn't they? Gibbs White and Catrone come back, but Jimenez is still obviously out. Podence is out. Willy Bolly, they've got Adam Traore might be out again. So they've got injury problems. West Brom, on the other hand, obviously, Sam Allardyce has come out and said that there's lots that he's wanted. I mean, you talk about the January transfer window. We're the 15th of January now. So it's getting on, isn't it? He wanted to do a lot in January, sign loads of players by the sounds of it, but he's really struggling to get players over the line, which if he goes into the second half of the season with a squad as it stands, it's very, very difficult. Obviously, I think they've added Snodgrass, haven't they, from West Ham, but it's difficult to see where they're coming from in their position in the table at the moment. They're 19th, obviously 6 points behind Brighton. So game in hand, it's not an unbelievably bad position. You'd expect them to be struggling, but only won one game all season, and it is very difficult to back them, isn't it, in any game? And probably a nice game for Wolves. Huge game. I've just gone Wolves here. I've gone 2-0 Wolves. I just struggled to back West Brom away from home, even though strangely they've picked up some good results, haven't they, on the road against City and Liverpool this season. So, if they could nick a point, it wouldn't surprise me too much. But I just think Wolves really need to win, and they should be fired up. Obviously, a bit of speculation around the manager's future, isn't there? Nuno's future, linked with the Arsenal job earlier this season. Whether he stays for the long term, maybe get a little bit fed up. But yeah, 2-0 Wolves here.
Yeah, it's now 5 league games without a win for Wolves, and he's mentioned down in 14th. We do know how quickly things can change. We've seen it before this season, 2 or 3 wins in a row, and you go shooting up the table because it's so close. But that's really disappointing. I remember when we did our predictions for the season as a whole. I think I predicted them to finish in 8th, and we both know a Wolves fan pretty well, and he was incredulous. He couldn't believe it. I'd picked them to finish so low down, but they're certainly not showing the signs of consistency to get challenged for that top 4, which many fans might have hoped for and expected in a season like this. They would have imagined themselves, when you see the likes of Leicester, Everton, Southampton, even Aston Villa up there, they certainly would have imagined themselves in that bunch of teams challenging for European football again. But yeah, consistency has been the main problem for them. 5 without a win now. I think it's only 2 wins in the last 11 Premier League games. But like you, I can see them winning this one. It is hard to back West Brom. I think West Brom's biggest hope coming into that match is those last 2 away games against Man City and Liverpool. Obviously, they came under different managers, but getting a draw against Anfield is not a feat many teams have managed recently. So Sam Allardyce will take huge confidence from that. Obviously, that result is completely undone by the home form since then. 9-0 on aggregate over the last 2 games, both at home. 5-0 to Leeds, 4-0 to Arsenal, both of whom are also in the bottom half of the table like Wolves are. So West Brom will be worried about maybe being on the end of a similar result there, but the way they're setting up maybe away from home is more inclined towards not getting beaten that heavily and maybe trying to nick a draw like they did at Liverpool, hit them on the break, which they might fancy their chances against Wolves of doing something quite similar. Wolves haven't been scoring many goals. I'm just backing them to win this one 1-0. I don't think there's going to be too much in it. But I do expect Wolves to get all 3 points. As you mentioned, it's just so hard to back West Brom at the moment. They do have a mountain to climb in terms of staying up. As you say, it's not an unassailable gap, 6 points with a game in hand, but Fulham also are above them and have 2 games in hand. So they've got survival certainly in their own hands more so than West Brom do. And Sam Allardyce is going to have to work some sort of magic to get his side out of that the hole they're in at the moment. But yeah, 7 without a win for West Brom, conceded 9 goals without reply in the last 2 league games, went out to Blackpool in the FA Cup. Is looking pretty bleak for West Brom at the moment, so, and I could see that continuing. So yeah, 1-0 Wolves for me there, both going for Wolves victories. 3 p.m. on Saturday is Leeds versus Brighton. Leeds, we talk about West Brom going out to a lower league team in the FA Cup. Leeds 3-0 against Crawley Town. Unbelievable result, really, that. And it feeds into the narrative which we've been saying pretty much every week. What to expect from Leeds? They can go and beat West Brom 5-0, and then a couple of weeks later they lose to Crawley 3-0. You just don't know what to expect from them. Brighton also struggling for victories at the moment. 9 without a win now, just 1 win in the last 16. Still 2 points clear of the relegation zone, but Fulham do have 2 games in hand over them. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, it's a really interesting game, isn't it? The Leeds. I mean, you mentioned the Crawley game. I think it was a bit, salt in the wounds. They brought on Mark Wright, didn't they? The TV presenter late on, obviously made his debut, and no, he's obviously a very talented footballer. He's obviously got previous in the game, but the fact that he made his professional debut against Leeds and they lost 3-0 and picked quite a strong side, Belzer, as well, didn't he? Obviously there were lots of changes, but it was still an experienced side with Cooper played, obviously Phillips, Shackleton, Alioski. There was a lot of Rodrigo, Costa. It wasn't like it was an under 23 side that we've seen in the FA Cup over the weekend. Obviously a lot of that enforced because of coronavirus, but to lose 3-0, like you say, it is the same story of their season recently. Winning 5-0 at West Brom recently, losing 3-0 at Tottenham. Obviously the Tottenham result, I mean, we both predicted them to lose that game purely because they do open up, don't they? And when you do that against Tottenham and teams like that, obviously you're going to be struggling. But Brighton, on the other hand, they played quite well against Manchester City, didn't they, last time out? Obviously their form's not great, but interesting to see the team selection in that game. Graham Potter, he picked Trossard and Percy Tau, who's back at the club now, and as a front two, made loads of changes. I'm still not sure if he knows his best side. Ben White's played a little bit further forward, hasn't he, recently? Obviously in midfield, and very interesting to see what he does for this game, because these are the type of games, as well as Leeds have done this season, Brighton will be thinking, teams like Leeds, we should be trying to maybe not beat, but not losing, because if you're going to keep losing, obviously they're down in 17th at the moment, aren't they? 2 points above the relegation zone, and Fulham 2 games in hand, and Fulham are playing really well recently, as we've seen. Obviously we're excellent against Tottenham, obviously tough game. I think they've got Chelsea and Manchester United in the next 2, so that's tough for Fulham. But Brighton only 2 wins all season. We've been praised them a lot, haven't we, for their performances? But need to get some results on the board now, I think. But this is a tough game. It's one of those, like you say, that is very, very tough to predict because of Leeds. We're not too sure, but I do think it will be tight. I've just gone 2-1 Leeds here.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this one. I really did. I started leaning towards Leeds, but in the end, I've just gone for 1-1 draw. Leeds don't draw too often because, as we say, it's either one extreme or the other in general for Leeds. But Brighton do seem to draw a lot, and their 2 defeats recently, I think their 2 defeats in the last 6 games have only been those narrow ones against Arsenal and Man City by a goal. They don't, in general, lose by many goals. They do concede quite a few goals, but they don't lose by many goals. I think it's only one in the last 14 or something like that Premier League games, so they've actually lost by more than 1 goal. So originally I was actually leaning towards 3-1 Leeds in this one. I thought this could be the sort of game with Brighton. They like to play a bit, and that could play into Leeds' hands. So I thought they could maybe get a few goals, as we've seen them do on plenty of times this season, score plenty of goals. But I think Brighton have got it in them to get something out of this game. They don't often get beaten by big scorelines. I can see them getting a point from this game. They pick up points very regularly, which is what has kept them out of the relegation zone so far. 8 of their 14 points, have come from draws in the Premier League season so far. So I can see them picking up another there. 1-1 for me in that one. Also at 3 p.m. on Saturday is West Ham versus Burnley. How do you see that one going, Matt?
Yeah, I struggled with this one, to be honest. I went a draw originally. I have just gone 1-0 West Ham in the end. I just think the Burnley against Manchester United game, I thought Burnley were pretty good for the first half of that game, but I thought United in the second half were really strong, and it did look like the goal was coming. And I think you worry for Burnley. Obviously, we've spoken about their issues in terms of finding the back of the net, and when Burnley do fall behind in games, I think that's when you worry. They're very capable of edging out 1-0 wins. Sheffield United in the last month, they went 1-0 ahead and then made it very difficult for Sheffield United. But I'm still not that sure about Burnley. I think they've had a few injury problems recently. They're sitting 16th at the moment, by no means out of the 4 points, I think, above the relegation zone. So still very much in the mix. And I think they play Liverpool, don't they, in their next game away from home, Burnley. So it's a tough couple of games because West Ham obviously sold Haller now and obviously looking to get another striker in, but having a good season, West Ham, sitting 10th in the table, just below Chelsea, actually level on points with Chelsea. And if you'd have offered that to the West Ham fans start of the season, if West Ham can finish top half this season, that's an unbelievable season for West Ham. Even if they were to finish, 11th, it's pretty good, especially their troubles recently in terms of, relegation. And you think they could have a good summer, West Ham. Obviously, They're a very attractive club, aren't they, for a lot of players, foreign players, to go and play at that stadium in London. Obviously, when the fans are back in a full stadium. So I think, I just think West Ham, recently West Ham at home have had some, little dips, and that they do tend to make hard work of games that they probably should win. But Burnley, I just think their lack of goals does worry me. I think they're solid at the back. They've got some good players, but lack of goals worries me. 1-0 West Ham.
Yeah, I've gone exactly the same. To me, this has got 1-0 written all over it. I think West Ham, I can see it being a sort of similar game. I think it was back in November. They played Fulham and Sheffield United in succession and sort of just edged to 1-0 wins of both of them. I can see this being a sort of similar game. As I say, Burnley don't score many goals, but they don't concede too many either. They're out of the relegation zone purely because of good, gritty victories they picked up recently after a really poor start to the season. They've started to climb the table with those sorts of victories. But yeah, 9 goals scored from 16 games. It's the joint lowest amount of goals scored in the league this season. So it is hard to back them to score too many goals, especially away from home. Just looking at it now, I think it's 1 goal in their last 6 away Premier League games. So they're really struggling to find the back of the net away from home at the moment. And as you say, West Ham are having a really good season. Prior to a recent sort of dip in form where they went 4 games without a win, they were right up there in 5th or 6th, if I remember correctly. And obviously that win against Everton last time out in their last Premier League game should give them the confidence to kick on. They made hard work of non-league Stockport in the FA Cup last time out, but that victory over Everton, I think, should be a big one to get their season back on track after what had been a little dip before that. By no means an awful run of form. They only lost one of those games. And actually, in recent times, in their last 15 Premier League games, I think it is their only defeats have been against Liverpool, Man United and Chelsea. And there's no shame in losing to those 3 big teams. So they're not losing too many games and certainly not losing games that they'd expect to win. And this is certainly one of those games that I think they'd expect to win. And I'm backing them just like you are to go on and win 1-0 in this one. At 5:30 on Saturday is another derby, a London derby between Fulham and Chelsea. West London derby between Fulham and Chelsea. Chelsea, we know, are in pretty poor Premier League form at the moment. Only 1 win in the last 6 Premier League games. Now, that was against West Ham and beaten comfortably by Man City at home last time out in the Premier League. Did bounce back against Morecambe in the FA Cup, but obviously there's only so much we can read into that game. And Fulham, you mentioned them earlier, they're picking up some decent results. The wins are still elusive. No wins in 6 for them since beating Leicester, but 5 draws in a row has certainly kept them in the battle for survival. And as I mentioned earlier, survival is technically in their hands with 2 points away from Brighton and those 2 games in hand, which they're going to have to make up, which will obviously make for a bit of a congested period later in the season. But yeah, that is certainly in their hands. And if they can keep on picking up points, particularly in those games and this game where they might not be expected to do it. They did it against Liverpool recently. They did it against Tottenham. Okay, Liverpool and Tottenham were underwhelming in that game, but Fulham deserve credit for making that the case. And Scott Parker, I think, deserves huge credit for the job he's done over the course of this season, because you and I were amongst the people who were sort of dooming them after 2 or 3 games because the defence looked so shoddy and they just didn't look like a Premier League team. But now they're grinding out points. They're in that run of 5 draws. They've also drawn with the likes of Brighton and Newcastle. Those are the sorts of games they'd probably be needing to turn into victories to really push themselves out of the relegation zone. But for now, draws are good. They certainly take 2 more draws in the next 2 games against Chelsea and Man United. And this is one I really went back and forth on. Chelsea's form just makes me struggle to back them at the moment, and Fulham have proven themselves hard to beat. So I was close to going for a Chelsea win, but I've actually gone for a draw in this one. I've gone for 1-1.
1-0, yeah. I did the preview for this yesterday, so I thought you'd have a look at that to copy me. But I mean, what, my 30 points ahead or something now in the prediction, so you need to bring it back up. Yeah, I've gone 2-1 Chelsea here. I just think Fulham were excellent against Tottenham. I thought Tottenham really should have gone on to win the game. They have this inability, don't they, Tottenham, to really go for games at the moment when they're 1-0 up. But Fulham, in fairness to them, were excellent. And they'll go into this game. You fancy Scott Parker will pick a similar side. Obviously, Loftus-Cheek can't play against his parent club. You fancy Lookman might come back into the side. But 3 at the back for Fulham maybe again. I think you mentioned their improvement defensively. I think that's been a big part of it. They look a lot more solid. Good technicians in midfield, and we'll go into this game full of confidence. Chelsea, on the other hand, I mean, obviously missing Kante through suspension, but apart from that, James has been past fit, so he'll come back into the side. And very interesting to see whether Timo Werner plays. Obviously, he ended his goal drought, didn't he, against Morecambe, but he's really struggled in the Premier League. You know, midfield is interesting. Will Havertz get a start? Will it be Jorginho and Kovacic, and Mount will obviously play, and wide as well? You know, Hudson-Odoi, a couple of goals in his last 2 games, but Will it be Pulisic and Ziyech out wide? I think there's a lot of decisions for Lampard to make ahead of this game. And you mentioned their form recently. I mean, look at the table, 9th in the table, Chelsea, only 3 points above Palace in 13th. That's worrying, very worrying for recently, talking about their title credentials earlier this season. But I just think their form recently, like you say, they were well beat by Manchester City. In fairness, City were, arguably their best performance of the season. City, they were incredibly dominant, but Fulham, Chelsea on the other hand were really disappointing. You mentioned their win last time out, obviously will boost confidence, but it's not the league form's a worry. I think it's, their Fulham, the record over Fulham's good. I think it's 2006, the last time they lost against Fulham. Luis Boa-Morte, a player, obviously, I'm sure you'll remember, he was a good player, wasn't he? Scored the winner at Craven Cottage in that game. So they're looking for a 6th straight win over Fulham. And I just fancy Chelsea here. I think they really need to win. Lampard's still under a bit of pressure. There's always talk, isn't there, recently of a short list that the club are putting together for potential, managers to replace him, and it's a huge game for Chelsea, purely because Fulham recently have been very, very difficult to beat. As we know, Tottenham found it very tough. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this game. I really do like Fulham. I love the stadium, and I really hope they stay up this season. And but struggling here on 2-1 Chelsea.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised if you get that one right, which could make me see me fall behind, further behind. But yeah, I had to take a risk with that one and go 1-1, I think. All right, the final game on Saturday is Leicester versus Southampton. This is a really interesting game between two teams having really good seasons. It's almost a year to the day, I think, since Southampton beat Leicester, bouncing back from that 9-0 defeat earlier in that season. So this has got a bit of history, this fixture recently. And this is all set up to be another great game, isn't it, Matt? How do you see it going?
Yeah, really good game. I went a draw originally, but obviously there'll be no Danny Ings, will there, for Southampton this weekend, which is... Or when he doesn't play for Southampton, that just immediately, makes me not shy away from them, because they've got a lot of other good players. But I mean, both know how important he is for Southampton, and the fact that he's not going to be there just makes me side with Leicester this season. I mean, looking at how both teams have performed this season, Leicester. I mean, what are Leicester? They're obviously going to be top 4 challengers, but could I sit here with real confidence and say Leicester are going to finish in the top 4? I'm just not sure. They're obviously sitting 4th at the moment. They're only 4 points off the top of the league, so maybe that's a little bit harsh. But I still think they've got periods in them, haven't they, where they can sort of pick up poor results and the like. And I'm just not sure. Southampton obviously in 7th as well, so it's a really good game on paper, isn't it? Sitting just behind Tottenham in the table, a point behind. And Hassan Hottel's having another fantastic season. We mentioned Chelsea and their shortlist. He's obviously a manager that's been linked with the Chelsea job recently. But, Leicester last 2, they beat Newcastle, didn't they, in their last Premier League game, and then going 1-4-0 at Stoke, which obviously it's the FA Cup. It's still an excellent result. And Southampton, yeah, like I say, it's just without Ings. I mean, that's Ward-Prowse is having a fantastic season. Obviously, Adams has played well this season, but just think their recent run, obviously, the fact they beat Liverpool last time out was a huge result, wasn't it? A really good performance and a fantastic goal from Danny Ings. But his absence, maybe a little bit. Have I changed my mind? I went a draw and I've just changed it at the last minute. I'm just going to go Leicester, even though Southampton have been really good in terms of their performance against Liverpool. I thought they were excellent. But yeah, just Leicester 2-1.
Well, to be honest, I think that Liverpool game highlights what you're saying about Danny Ings. It was that moment of, ingenuity and genius, lobbing Alisson with just a perfect finish. That was the difference between the two sides. And if you look at their recent games, that's their only goal in their last 4 Premier League games. And it took that bit of spark from Danny Ings. So the difference between him playing and not playing is a massive difference to their goal threat. And to be honest, that's that, and the flip side of it, that Jamie Vardy was a bit of a doubt, but looks like he's going to be fit for Leicester. So they're 2 star strikers. One's fit for Leicester, the other's not for Southampton. That was pretty much the difference between in my thinking for this one. I've also gone for Leicester. I've gone for 2-0, even though I was also close to a draw, and I wouldn't be too surprised to see Southampton go on and win this one. I have predicted Leicester to win by 2 goals because they've certainly got it in them to score those goals. I think Maddison should be fit for this one as well, by the looks of things. Him and Barney linking up, as we know, can be really dangerous. And Leicester in full flow are among the most exciting and best attacking outfits in the Premier League. I think they're certainly in that top 4 race, and I wouldn't be surprised because, as you say, they do have the tendency maybe to go on a bit of a dip, but every other team in the league has had that tendency so far this season as well. So I think if they're ever going to finish in the top 4 again after obviously winning the title a few seasons back, this is probably going to be their season. I certainly think they're as well equipped as the likes of Everton, Southampton, Tottenham to do exactly that. When you consider the other names you put in that race are usually the likes of Chelsea and Arsenal and how far they are behind Leicester as things stand. They'll really fancy the chance of getting back to Champions League football this season. It's games like this which could prove the difference, and the next game after this against Chelsea, and then against Everton, then against Leeds. It's really, really interesting run coming up for Leicester. And we'll probably learn a lot about them, because games like this, Southampton, arguably even Chelsea now, and Everton, and then Leeds, they're all games which they might now go into expecting to win, but also games which are easily a banana skin, and you wouldn't be too surprised if they go on and lose them, because they're relatively evenly matched teams at the moment. So if they can come through those next 4 league games with a good points tally, I think we'll learn a lot about whether they will actually be top 4 challengers and really push for that Champions League space this season. I do expect them to do that, and expect them to win this game 2-0. So push on for the top 4 again, and that could even lift them towards 1 point, 2 points of the top of the table, certainly 1 point until Sunday. And speaking of Sunday, it kicks off. Obviously, there's a huge game later on Sunday, but it kicks off with Sheffield United versus Tottenham Hotspur. Sheffield United finally got that first win on the board. Whether it's too little, too late, is now 9 points to safety, isn't it? For Sheffield United, it will be probably the greatest of great escapes we've ever seen if they get out of this. But the 1-0 win over Newcastle last time out finally gave them a foundation to build on. The problem for them is they have to build on it against the Tottenham side, who are teeming with quality. Obviously, a very disappointing result against Fulham last time out. But before that in the league, they were 3-0 winners against Leeds, which again showed their quality, and they've got world-class players throughout their side. So it's a very difficult game for Sheffield United to bounce back in. I think Tottenham, you alluded to it earlier, the problem they've had in recent weeks is going 1 up and then not pushing on for more, not killing the game. They did do that against Leeds, but that's been an exception to the rule a little bit. Certainly against Wolves and against Fulham, they took the lead and then just didn't push on when they had the game in their hands. And I know there's a lot of frustration growing towards the style. I know a Tottenham fan who's keen for Mourinho out because he doesn't agree with the style of football they're playing. They've got the players to be going more all-out attacking, but it's just not Mourinho's style. If you think against Fulham, if you really let Son and Kane run wild, as they were earlier in the season, to be fair, you'd expect them to put that game to bed. But Fulham were in it throughout. They played really well to them, to be fair to them, Fulham. And obviously got that equaliser in there in the end, deservedly so, and Tottenham dropped another 2 points, which leaves them in 6th place. So, Tottenham do need to stamp out those sorts of drop points. And even when they were top of the league back a few months ago, that's sort of why both of us were sort of saying they probably wouldn't be title contenders, because they have that tendency to drop points in those sorts of games. This is another potential banana skin for them, considering that Sheffield United win last time out. And I think I mentioned last week in the podcast that they're really a confidence team. That win over Bristol Rovers in the FA Cup, their first in any competition this season, followed up by that win over Newcastle. Suddenly we could be seeing a completely different Sheffield United in the next few weeks. Now they've got that winning feeling back. But that said, this is such a difficult game for them, and I'm going for Tottenham to win this one 1-0.
1-0, yeah, I've gone 2-1 Tottenham here. I just think, you mentioned Tottenham's form. They only won 1 of their last 6 in the league, which is a little bit surprising, isn't it? It was that game you were talking about, the Leeds game. Recently you mentioned, obviously, it was a similar story against Palace, start of the 13th of December, where they just couldn't find a way to win the game. And I think last season they you see down the years they have improved at that, finding ways to win games away from home. And I just think they'll get there here. Sheffield United, as good as they were against Newcastle, and the result was excellent. I thought Newcastle were horrendous in that game. So he went down to 10 men, which is far from ideal. But I just thought they're defensive enough as it is, it's Newcastle. But to go down to 10 men, I thought they were really, really horrid in that game, Newcastle. And Sheffield United deserve credit, and their performances, I think, recently have certainly picked up. And I think team selection for this game will be very interesting. Billy Sharp scored the penalty, didn't he, against Newcastle? And, is he worth a start now? Obviously, they've got loads of players, haven't they, in the final third? I think Burke, McGoldrick, obviously Brewster's not really happening for him, Mousse. It's not like they're short of numbers. I just think he's trying to find a combination. McGoldrick plays more often than not, but just trying to find a way to get back to, not what they were last season, but just find a way to put some wins on the board. You mentioned there, if they were to win here, really put themselves, give themselves confidence when it moving forward, is still an awful, like you say, a big task. 5 points from 18 games is not good at all. But if they were to win here, really, really does give them a boost. And as we saw last season, they've got the players there to to go on a run and to make it very difficult for teams. But yeah, Tottenham, I just think they'll get there in this game. The quality in the final third, Kane, Son. I mean, it's just, I think it's strange that Mourinho tries to rely on his defence when it's just, for me, nowhere near good enough. You know, the strength of Tottenham is going forward. You know, they've got some of the best players in the league, you know, in European football, in Kane and Son. But at the back, I just don't think they're even close to being good enough to hold on to teams. Not like the Mourinho teams of Chelsea, you know, Terry, Carvalho, players like that, and of capable of edging out 1-0 wins. I just think I don't think they've got that in them, and that's why it surprises me. But you know, it's difficult to change, isn't it? For Mourinho, he's obviously got a way of playing, and about the league table at the moment, obviously down in 6th at the moment. They're only 6 points off the top of the league, Tottenham. So if you'd have offered them that, you know, middle of January, they certainly would have taken it, you know, in and around the top 4, 2 points off Leicester. So, you know, win here and they probably might go into the top 4, obviously, depending on other results. So it's still, I think, been a decent season for Tottenham. Obviously, they've got some things to work on, certainly going forward. But yeah, this was a really, really tight one. But I've just gone Tottenham 2-1.
2-1 Tottenham for Matt in that one. All right, time for the big one, the Sportsmole Football Shorts derby, Matt. Liverpool versus Manchester United, the top two. Obviously, this is always a huge, huge game, the biggest game in the English football calendar, and bigger than any time in a long time recently, because Liverpool and Manchester United are the top two in the table. United obviously top of the table after that win over Burnley last time out. Liverpool haven't been in Premier League action now since January 4th, so it's been a while since that defeat against Southampton, bounced back against Villa's Kids in the FA Cup. How do you see this one going? Obviously a huge match, isn't it, for both sides?
Yeah, it's a big one. I think it's the point you mentioned that they're always big games, but the fact that recently, obviously, United have been nowhere near Liverpool, and when you play them recently, it's almost like, of course, you want to beat them, but it's not really changing much in terms of, you know, a title challenge. But this, I mean, we spoke about this for a long time yesterday with Sam Homewood on, didn't we, from MUTV, and touched on this. Well, not even touched on this game. We had a good half-hour chat about this fixture, which is obviously incredibly huge. You mentioned, obviously, the Liverpool's last game was against Villa, wasn't it? With Villa's, you know, under 18s and some under 23. So it's not, still picked quite a strong side, didn't he? Klopp obviously lost at Southampton in their last Premier League game, and United going 3 points clear with that win at Burnley. And I thought the performance at Burnley was really not impressive in the fact that, you know, it wasn't a 4-0 game, but I just think it was a title winning performance, strong at the back. Obviously made some changes, and the team selection for this game is going to be absolutely fascinating for me. Obviously you fancy McTominay and Fred will come back in. Will Pogba play off the left? You know, Rashford, Fernandes, Martial looks like he might be okay. Look by the hamstring late on, but the indications are that he will be fit. And the fact that Cavani played 90 minutes against Burnley suggests to me that he will be on the bench, Cavani, for this game. It will be Martial. Obviously, there's not going to be any surprises at the back. Shaw's been fantastic. Maguire, you fancy Bailly, he'll play again, even if Lindelof manages to prove his fitness. It's a huge, huge game. United's recent record against Liverpool is obviously not the best, but I just think Liverpool's defensive problems that I'm sure you will mention, and their problems going forward as well. They haven't been free-flowing recently in terms of scoring goals, and I'm finding it difficult to back United purely because, you know, Liverpool's home, was it 2017 since Liverpool last lost a Premier League game?
67 games, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's very, very tough to go and back with any confidence they're going to go and win this game, United. But I just think United, there's loads of ways that we can hurt teams now, strong at the back, counter-attack inside, and can really edge out results now. And I think a point would be an excellent result for United. I think it'd be a decent result for Liverpool as well, to be honest, considering the circumstances surrounding the game. And it would keep United, obviously, with a bit of a cushion over Liverpool. So it's obviously a game I'm hugely looking forward to, and I'm really, really hoping that comes through. But I said yesterday, didn't know what my score prediction will be. It is 1-1, and I'm hoping for a really good game, but not from Liverpool, obviously.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think this game could go one of two ways, and in my score prediction, I've sort of gone in the middle of those two ways, so maybe I'm contradicting myself a bit here. But it could either be, you know, a tight and cagey affair, which we have seen in these sorts of games at Anfield recently, probably more so when Mourinho was in charge of United. He came and parked the bus at Anfield. Solskjaer, you'd think, with United in their current form, was it 29 points from the last 33 available in the Premier League? Sort of consistency we haven't seen from anyone really this season in the Premier League, which is why they're now top of the table. Whereas Liverpool come into it in a bit of a dip. And I think Solskjaer, it'd be interesting to see if he's brave enough to really play to United's strengths and go and try and win the game. Because as good as Liverpool's home form have been, if United play like they did against Leeds in a game as open than that, they could easily go and win this game. However, if United play like they did against Wolves, Villa and Burnley, maybe more recently, I don't think they will go and win this game. So it'll be interesting to see how he approaches it. If he really tells his attackers the pace of them, the likes of Rashford, Pogba releasing them, Fernandes, if he tells them to just sort of hit Liverpool on the break and take advantage of that defensive line, which, as you say, not sure who will play at centre-back this time. I think it'll be Reece Williams. I don't think has the pace to cope with that Manchester United attack. Nat Phillips probably falls into that category. Henderson, perversely, is probably our best option therefore at centre-back alongside Fabinho. So that's a centre midfield pairing at centre-back. But then you saw against Southampton, the difference between having Henderson in midfield and at centre-back is the Liverpool performance suffers for it. So it'll be very interesting to see who starts at centre-back. It looks like Joel Matip might not make it, which would be a blow. But yeah, that patched up Liverpool defence against the pacey Manchester United attacks will certainly give the United fans a lot of optimism that they can hurt Liverpool. I can certainly see them getting on the scoreboard here, potentially more than once. But I think Liverpool, the reason behind him choosing a strong team against Aston Villa was because we'd gone 2 Premier League games without a goal. And obviously a lot of rival fans were saying, Klopp can never moan about 5 subs again because he's picked a strong team for this FA Cup. But it's 9 days since that game, and would have been 13 days between games had he rested his full team. So you can see fully why he chose those players for that, and to build up a bit of confidence by getting a few goals under their belt. And I think this is the perfect game for Liverpool to bounce back from 2 pretty shoddy performances against Newcastle and Southampton when you never really got going. It's unforgivable to not get going for a Liverpool-Manchester United game. So this could be the perfect game to sort of shock them back into life. If it was at Old Trafford, I might be predicting something different, but given it's at Anfield, I am predicting Liverpool win, which you'll be unsurprised to hear. And I've been toying between 2. I've been toying between 3-2, which, I would hope for. I'd hope for a good open attacking game because that would suit both teams, and all the neutral fans, because it'd be a good game. And I'd back Liverpool's attack to outscore Manchester United's attack, even with Liverpool's defence as they are at the moment. But in the end, I've reined myself in a little bit and gone for 2-1 to Liverpool in this game, I think.
Prize is not 4-0. To be honest, Barney, that is the exact reason why you're 30 points behind in the prediction, because you have the blinkers on, which is unfortunate. But
no, we'll see. I think Liverpool back to the top of the table with this one. 2-1 victory I've gone for. Reined myself in, as you say. Also on Sunday is Manchester City versus Crystal Palace. Man City very much in the title race again now, up to 3rd with that win over Brighton in midweek. I think it's seven wins in a row across all competitions now, and 14 games without defeat. So they're very much starting to build some momentum, which had been lacking earlier in the season. And they're very much a team who have sort of snuck up on the title race. There's been so many teams linked with challenging for the title so far this season. So many different teams leading the way at different points of the season. Man City have always been, in and around mid-table almost until this recent run of form, which has catapulted them up to 3rd. They've got a game in hand over Manchester United and a better goal difference. So technically speaking, the title is still in their hands. If every team was to win the rest of their games, the Man City will go and win the league on goal difference. And they face a Crystal Palace side who obviously picked up a good draw against Arsenal. They looked very stubborn at the back there, just wouldn't let Arsenal through, and had a few chances going forward as well. So they came away from that thinking they probably could have won, maybe should have. James Tompkins obviously hit the bar in that game. So this is a difficult game for Man City, but on their current form, I think they've got what it takes to win this one. I've gone for a 2-0 win to Man City in this one.
2-0, yeah, I've gone exactly the same. I'm struggling to. I mean, Palace, I mentioned it when we did the preview for the Arsenal game. I think they're a tricky side away from home. They can be. Obviously, won at Old Trafford. They won at Fulham this season. West Brom, they hit 5, didn't they? And draw at West Ham as well. I do think they can be very, very tough to beat. Obviously, pace on the counter, and like you say, very stubborn at the back against Arsenal, and arguably should have won that game. So it's obviously it's a tough double header for Palace, going away to Arsenal, then away to City. But you mentioned City. I think they're the team that worry me probably the most at the moment. I mean, 7 in all competitions, 4 in the Premier League. Obviously, they were 1-0 against Brighton last time out. They huffed and puffed, but got there in the end. And they're the type of results that maybe they wouldn't have got earlier this season. They'd have maybe dropped points. And obviously their last couple of performances before that were good. They were good against Newcastle and excellent against Chelsea. So you mentioned they're position in the table. I think the interesting thing looking at the table for me, I mean, they've only scored 25 goals this season, City. You think about the players they've got. Obviously, they've got problems at centre forward. Aguero has had his problems, so has Gabriel Jesus as well. But, there's 12 fewer than Liverpool and 9 fewer than United in terms of goals this season, which is a little bit surprising. But defensively, they've been much better than both of those sides. And they've got, probably Ruben Diaz, with Van Dijk being injured. Ruben Diaz is, arguably the best centre-back in the league at the moment in terms of current form. So, obviously got some great things going for them. If they can find a bit of sort of something more going forward, then they're going to be very, very difficult to stop. And I just fancy City here. I mean, Palace, I think they'll cause some problems on the counter, but City's form is really good. Their confidence is obviously growing, and some of their key players, especially De Bruyne, is coming back into some really good form. So City here 2-0.
Yeah, both gone for 2-0 Man City in that one. Rounding off the game week is Arsenal versus Newcastle United on Monday night. Newcastle, you mentioned earlier, dreadful against Sheffield United last time out, and there's growing calls for Steve Bruce to be sacked. Fans aren't happy, not only with the results, but also with the way they're playing, the lack of attacking threat, and everything about that. And Arsenal, obviously drew a blank against Crystal Palace last time out and were pretty poor in that game themselves, which came as a bit of a surprise considering they'd seemingly turned a bit of a corner before that with 4 wins in a row across all competitions, including 3 wins in a row in the Premier League to really climb up the table after such a dreadful run before that. This on paper looks like a perfect game for them to bounce back to winning ways, considering Newcastle in pretty poor form. Obviously, they met not too long ago in the FA Cup when Arsenal needed extra time to go and win that one 2-0. I've actually gone for the same scoreline in that within 90 minutes. I've gone for 2-0 Arsenal victory in this one. It's just very hard to back Newcastle at the moment. The way they're playing, it's hard to even really back them scoring. Having said that, there are positives to take from their recent form. The draw against Liverpool, and it's been a difficult run for them. They only narrowly lost to Leicester, weren't exactly battered by Man City in that 2-0 defeat. It's the Sheffield United defeat which will probably hurt most out of any of them, because they probably would have gone into those 3 games against Man City, Liverpool and Leicester. Even 1 point is probably more than many fans would have been fearing from that run of 3 games. But then to go and lose at Sheffield United, who hadn't won, as we know, for so long, is so disappointing, and it's just increased the anger amongst Newcastle fans who want Steve Bruce out. I think points-wise, Steve Bruce has done a pretty decent job when he's been at Newcastle. I think he's got an unfair ride for a lot of his time, but now is starting more so than ever before. I think is starting to be about the way they're playing. I don't think Newcastle fans have ever been truly happy with the way they set up and the way they're playing under Steve Bruce. But I think that defeat to Sheffield United really pushed it over the edge. And I can see them losing again, unfortunately, here, and not scoring again. I've gone for 2-0 Arsenal win here.
2-0, yeah. I've gone 1-0 Arsenal here. I mean, you mentioned Newcastle. I think it's the team that Steve Bruce picked for the Sheffield United game. I know he's got players out, St Maximin, Shelvey, obviously players that would improve them going forward. But you played 5 at the back, with Hayden, Hendrick, Longstaff as a midfield 4, obviously Fraser as well, who got sent off. So arguably you got Callum Wilson up front by himself with Fraser, who then gets sent off. So you've got very, very little going forward. Obviously, the bench was quite strong. Joelinton, Murphy, Almiron, players that haven't particularly been fantastic this season. Certainly not in terms of goals, but it was just an incredibly negative formation, side performance, and I think just that it's more the performance. The results this season, like you say, it's not like they're in the relegation zone and playing particularly poorly. They're 15th at the moment, 7-point cushion over the bottom 3. So. Not, it's pretty good when you look at it like that. I just think the performances recently, you mentioned the Liverpool one was good, but if they fall behind in games, they really struggle to get them back selves in. If they didn't have Callum Wilson, they, for me, would be in the relegation zone. They certainly would if he took his goals away. But Arsenal, I think, just brought to an end, didn't it? Their little recent run that had been good. I think the fact that he picked such a attacking side against Palace, Aubameyang, Lacazette, Saka, Smith Rowe, and couldn't find the back of the net will be really disappointing considering obviously how much they've improved recently. But maybe a bit of a reality check for Arsenal. I think some fans were getting carried away, weren't they? That maybe they could now push towards the top 4 because the gap is insurmountable. But I just think Arsenal are where they're 11th in the table at the moment. If I had to say right now where I think Arsenal will finish, I'd probably say 9th, maybe 8th. I don't think they're going to finish in the top 6. I don't think they're good enough or consistent enough. Maybe top half, and I just think that's where they are at the moment. I don't think we've obviously got a big project to do there, but Yeah, Newcastle can be stubborn. Obviously, it'll be another defensive. Steve Bruce is not going to open up to Arsenal. He's going to make it very difficult, as Palace did on Thursday. So, yeah, tight game, but 1-0 Arsenal.
1-0 to Arsenal for that one. All right, thanks, Matt. We will be back for our next round of predictions on Tuesday, but we do also have a special live show looking forward to the Liverpool United game and all Sunday's games on Sunday morning. So we'll be live from 10:30 for that one, and we'll also look back at Saturday's action over the weekend. So be sure to join us for that. You can subscribe to us on all the usual podcast channels and on YouTube to make sure you don't miss one of these episodes. And in the meantime, you can find previews for all of these games, plus many more games over on sportsmore.co.uk. We hope to see you on Sunday, and thank you for joining us.